Coming up, the team continued their race around the UK to shoot all the national parks in only 1 week. We try our hand at panning on moving subjects. We venture to what is arguably the world's best landscape. And we take a photo of a door. Welcome to another episode of Photography Online. As well as everything you've just seen, in the next hour we will be announcing the winners of our Accurate Watches giveaway, so if you enter to win one of these stylish watches, keep it here to see if you're a winner. Before all of that though, we have got the small matter of a photo challenge to address. Some of the team are halfway through racing around the UK as they attempt to shoot all 15 UK national parks in only 1 week. Now last time they were let down by the weather, which has put them well behind schedule, so they need a good day ahead to try and get back on track. As always, Accura's watches are timekeeping for us, so thanks to them for their support. I am wearing my Accura's watch with pride, so check me out. All right, well, let's see what day 5 has in store.
Previously on the National Parks Challenge.
I have come up with a new challenge for you if you're up for it.
Challenge always sounds good.
Wax strips and Viagra.
Some of us are trying to rest in amongst this
all, I know, well,
squalor.
Anyway. Weather's clearing up, finally drying out.
Yeah,
look at the state of that, honestly. What's going on?
Get out of the way, come on, move.
And that's it, that's your first proper photo.
I'm a real photographer.
Well, I don't know about that.
Day 5 of our week-long challenge to shoot all 15 national parks in the UK should have seen us waking up in the Brecon Beacons. However, poor weather had left our plans to shoot the Pembrokeshire Coast the previous evening in tatters. So sadly, we were still here and now well behind schedule. Our contingency plan was to try to get a morning shot of the picturesque town of Tenby. With its colourful buildings, sandy bay and island in the water, it certainly had the potential for a great photo. The view from high up allowed James and I to bag something we were mildly satisfied with, but we knew we could do better.
So do you think we've got it from up here, Harry? What do you reckon?
No, well, we've not got the light just yet, but we've got quite a while to wait, at least an hour, I would say.
The list to pass over. But the early morning shot, as it were, we've got that, haven't we?
Got the twilights, yeah.
And whether we wait for this, because obviously...
Well, it might not happen, but whether so...
And we've got to get to... Where is it we're going?
We've got to get to the Brecon Beacons first,
Beacons.
and then to the Norfolk Broads, which is...
About as far away from here as you can get.
9 hours driving title.
So, but we might as well give this a little bit of a chance, and if it happens, it happens, and if it doesn't, it doesn't. But in the meantime, should we pop down and have a look at this log that's on the beach down there?
Yeah, we might as well.
And see if we can get something with the church, the rock, and see what happens. Shoot it from here with the log at 45 degrees, and just do that. Right hand side of the frame, roughly where that jogger person is, there somewhere. Left hand just clipping those rocks. See there's a turquoise building there?
Yeah.
And that turquoise building there.
To capture the desired movement in the waves, I fitted a 3-stop ND filter and a polarizer, which gave an exposure of between 1 and 2 seconds at f11.
Be quite interesting to see actually whether we like the waves, the movement of the waves coming in, going out, over the log, to the side, between the log and the sea, or we want the shiny reflections.
Well, if you want the reflections, we can try a much longer exposure if you want. I can stick a 10-stop filter in, smooth out the water. That might be a bit too
I'm not sure would you still get the reflection? I'm not sure you'll get that clean
there.
reflection.
It was all going so well until... No! That's my only dry shoes. Honestly. Shoot it, you got boots on.
Yeah, but
Quick, that's what you want. Oh, I've got such wet feet. Despite this, I struggled on like a true pro, as clearly James wouldn't have been able to get the job done by himself. I think this will be the shot, actually.
it's very good, yeah.
I think it's better than the twilight shot from earlier.
Go back to that original composition, that's the one.
Yeah, see, I
Original
just
craft.
needed a tiny bit more space underneath the log, that's all.
After what seemed like an eternity in Pembrokeshire, we finally got a shot we were happy with.
That's the one. Nailed it.
So, with that in the bag, it was simply a case of packing up. What could possibly go wrong?
Sake.
Can we bleep that, please?
Stupid bloody beach.
Give it
Hold
here.
that.
But the best thing you can do in this situation is just rub it off like that.
Of course, I was joking. This is what you really need to do.
So I've rinsed all the sand off in salt water for you, Harry. But
Ideally, we want fresh water though, don't we? So I've got
some Barocca.
that doesn't look like
Oh.
water.
Bit of a pop from the Barocca there. There we go. Almost good as new, that, doesn't
Wonderful.
it? Do you like the colour?
I think it might make the clouds look a bit better. It's like a really warm,
Yes.
warm cast.
Almost tobacco-esque, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So it was time to wave goodbye to Pembrokeshire, and the residents in the beachside apartments gave us a far better send-off than the local council. Oh, crap. Did you not pay?
I thought you
I
paid.
asked you, look, it's just right there, I asked you to pay.
Well, I didn't.
Do not ignore.
30 quid. Still. Better than a campsite.
The Welsh weather was continuing to throw hurdles at us, so we made a plan to head for a waterfall in our next park, as these conditions were perfect. It wasn't far to the Brecon Beacons, although since this map was printed, the park has been renamed to Banal Bride Chieniog, which, when typed out on a text document, gets auto-corrected to Banana Fried Chicken, a far easier name to pronounce and remember.
Upon arriving in a national park, formerly known as the Brecon Beacons, we consulted the waterfall map to see where to go. The problem was that it was one of those confusing maps which, even after studying it for several minutes, we were none the wiser as to where to go. At the end, we decided to head in the general direction away from the road, and it wasn't long before we could hear the distant rumble of whitewater below us. So I think the waterfall we want is directly below us.
You can hear it, yeah.
Hear something. Problem is, there might be a path to it, but it's quite a long way that way. It's at least 30 minutes, maybe more. We need to get to the Broads
Yeah.
soon, so let's try a shortcut. You know, what we've got to lose at the moment.
Well, I don't know. A broken neck, dignity, street credibility, to name but a few.
I was right, it was slippery and steep, but the gamble paid off, and it wasn't too long before the waterfall we'd come to shoot came into view.
That was a good shortcut, that.
That does the job. We now had to get our shot in the bag as quickly as possible and get back on the road in order to make up the time we had lost the previous day. At least the conditions were perfect for this subject. Bright yet diffused light evenly bathed the scene, plus we had the place to ourselves, which is always a nice bonus.
So polarizer here is kind of like a double-edged sword, because if you look through that, I really like the way that this rock is reflecting the light. And so you want to keep that,
and you'll see how it all disappears. So when it makes the rest of the scene look good, this rock deteriorates.
Well, if you're on digital, we could take 2 pictures.
No, that's not in the rules.
And merge them together.
That's not in the rules. Ruth said no dodgy stuff, remember? So we've got to do it properly. So I'm thinking maybe a halfway house.
Well, it's a good thing about a polarizer, it's not just on and off.
So I've got all this set up. Polarizer's kind of 50% polarizing. I'm at f32 to get the depth of field I need between this rock and the furthest point. That's giving me an exposure of 4 seconds.
Yeah.
But because this film that I'm using suffers from reciprocity failure, we actually need to give it 5 seconds.
Even in this light?
Yeah. It's just because once you get beyond a second, you need to give it extra exposure. So what I want you to do is I'll start the exposure, and when it gets to 0, I want you to put that in front of the lens.
Okay.
All right?
Why?
Because I can't close the shutter without touching the camera.
Right.
And so I'll jog it.
Yeah.
So, right.
Just another problem. I mean, why?
Yeah, but we've solved it, haven't we? We've solved it in a really basic, elementary way.
I just need to come along on every shoot now.
Yeah, right, ready? Stop arguing, get on with it. Right, it's quite wide angle this, so don't have it there. No, you don't have to do it at the beginning, at the end, you big lummox. Right, out the way. Okay, so watch this timer. Ready?
Right.
We're open in 3, 2, 1, and I'm open. When that gets to 0, go. And we close, see? So I had to wobble the camera to close the shutter.
What? Who designed that?
Someone in Japan. With the Welsh parks now completed, it was time to head back to England and finish the remaining ones there. Now the sensible thing to do would have been to drive to Exmoor in Devon, just a short distance around the coast. But the problem was that the location we had researched for Exmoor was a morning shot, and we couldn't afford to waste another evening. So we made the brave, some might say stupid, decision to attempt to drive across the entire width of the UK at its widest point. The master plan was to grab an evening shot in the Norfolk Broads. Sunset was still 8 hours away, and the drive was only 7, so we'd make it as long as we didn't hit traffic.
It seemed as though Wales really didn't want to let us go. Look at the building on the right and note the time. Now look at the time and you'll see how far we'd managed to get in 40 minutes. By the time we cleared that gridlock, we were now due to arrive in the Norfolk Broads National Park 20 minutes before sunset. As long as we didn't run into more traffic, we'd just about be okay.
According to the sat-nav, we were due to arrive at our destination at 7:53 p.m. Sunset was at 8:01, but this assumed that we weren't going to need to stop. Sadly, we didn't have enough fuel to get across the country, plus James needed a wee. This meant we were now scheduled to arrive exactly at sunset, in a location we've never been to before. So this was really going to be a fly-by-the-seat-of-the-pants affair. But hey, that is what challenges are all about.
As we neared the Norfolk Broads, the sky was shaping up nicely to offer some amazing evening light. Despite having had our foot to the floor for most of the day, we were now scheduled to arrive 5 minutes after sunset. Still, it's not as if we were missing any decent light. The last few meters involved a race against time, literally, before all the colour was drained from the sky. I metered to expose for the highlights, but knew this scene was going to work better in digital, as there was just too much contrast to do anything except for a silhouette shot with transparency film.
Just have to ignore the colour and pretend it didn't happen and that we weren't late. Because if you were here on a day when there was no colour, you'd be quite happy with that sky. And it is absolutely all about thirds, this shot. So rapid out of the van there, no tripod, handhold and get on with it. Checking for sharpness because I'm right at the extremities of what will be possible and not. And that looks pretty sharp there. It's pin sharp in fact.
So we've got the sunset off to the left of the lighthouse. I keep on calling it a lighthouse. It's a windmill, but if I frame it so that I get the colour, the windmill is then facing out of shot, which I really don't like. So I'm ignoring the colour because it's kind of dying anyway. And I'm going to frame up here so that the windmill is facing into frame. And then I think what I'll do is I'm going to run back to the HQ and get a couple of torches just as the ambient light levels fall. We can kind of paint the windmill with light. It's white, so it will reflect the light really well. And hopefully, we've got a great sky at the moment, so hopefully that will be the shot.
With the potential for that shot now gone, we moved around to the other side of the windmill to catch the very last of the cool ambient light illuminating it from the western side.
And get that lovely ambient, natural ambient, that's falling on the windmill there, or lighthouse as you call it.
It's quite a nice lighthouse.
It's a very good lighthouse. Right, so what we're doing here is dive straight into the reed beds to try and solve a couple of problems. Firstly, the line of foreground of green grass up there, which doesn't really suit the scene. So I'm going to use these reeds here to set the scene and complement the reeds that are on the other side. But it presents a couple of challenges, particularly where focus is concerned. So, very simply, pre-focus on the windmill and then move the camera around, because it's going to be, in the end, about finding a particular path straight through the reeds where the sort of the cross-section of the windmill is at its very best. So we'll give it a go and see if we can get away with it. Depth of field wise, not too bothered, nice and shallow really. It's very dark, I'm light on equipment, so I just kind of have to get on with it, what I've got, which is a fixed 35mm lens anyway. So let's give it a go.
So this is a 60-second exposure, and you can see I've got my countdown. I've got 33 seconds
analog
to go.
timer.
My analog timer.
Actually,
yeah.
We need to get you. What are they called? Hourglass. An hourglass. But
That's
not
the
for
one.
an hour. A minute's glass.
Yes. But because the light levels are falling so rapidly, by the time the minute's up, the light levels would have changed. So I'm going to give it an extra 10 seconds, just because that's the way I roll.
I'm not happy with this shot at all. The boats in the background look like parked cars and totally distract from everything which this photo should be saying. We couldn't afford to not get a shot here this evening, so with the light fading, there was not much left to do but to create our own light.
Right, all I need you to do is tell me how long your exposure is.
Yep.
And then we'll do a trial and error. You tell me if it's too much or too little.
All right, well, give me a second. We're getting there. If you can hear me without bellowing across the Broads too much, it's going to be around about 1.5 seconds at f2.8 to start with.
Blimey, can you go to like about 10 seconds to give me a chance?
I can do that. I'll give you a whole 15 seconds at the moment.
Okay, just tell me when you're open and I'll start.
Right, I'll give you a little countdown. 3, 2, 1, go.
Okay, I'm just going to do the bottom bit first. I'm going to work on the blades. Do a bit more on the top.
That's enough there, yep.
This shot is okay, but it has the same issues Marcus mentioned previously with the distracting boats in the background. We decided to move back to the other side of the windmill to clean up the composition.
Right, that's it, back there, that's it. That is absolutely bang on there. You could almost let it burn in there. Let it burn rather than paint it. Oh, look at that, it's a beauty. Lovely light work, son. Look at that.
This shot is perfect. The artificial light is beautifully balanced with the ambient light, creating the ideal atmosphere for this scene. Against all odds, we pulled off what seemed like the impossible.
However, to get back onto schedule, we now had to drive to our next location, the South Downs National Park, to be in position for the morning. We were all absolutely shattered, but to stand any chance of achieving the challenge, we needed to power on through the night and through the tiredness.
As we arrived on the south coast, we all agreed that no one in the history of mankind has ever been stupid enough to photograph the Pembrokeshire Coast, the Brecon Beacons, the Norfolk Broads, and then drive to the South Downs on the same day. If we fail in this challenge, then at least we have that to brag about down the pub for years to come.
Next time on the National Parks Challenge,
A romantic couple, hand in hand, something like that.
we could do a self-portrait.
We're definitely not doing that. I'm going to go and sort somebody else out.
Oh, it's in my eye. I haven't even touched it.
Oh, it won't stop hurting.
That's not helping. Oh no, it's running back in.
If we miss this shot...
Oh.
I can't wait to see what was causing so much pain for Harry and James next month. And once again, a big thank you to Accurist Watches for partnering with us to make the photo challenge possible. As promised, we have got 2 of these stunning Accurist watches to give away, each worth £359. So if you entered our competition last month, keep watching to find out if one of these will be on your wrist soon. As always, we'll be giving away a 3rd one on our next live show, so if you want to be in with another chance of winning this great prize, then all you need to do is join the best bunch of people on the planet, the Photography Online official supporters, affectionately known as our POOs. If you're wondering what they look like...
I'm Adrian. I'm based in London. I'm one of the Photography Online official supporters and love shooting landscapes and doing so here from Utah.
Hello, I'm Nigel Freestone. I've been a Photography Online supporter since day one. I'm happy to be one of the growing band of poos.
Alright, I'm Lee from Lancashire, out enjoying the landscape tonight, and I'm proud to be a poo supporter.
If you are one of our many supporters, keep sending in your selfie videos when you're out and about with your camera, as we love to see what you get up to. And you never know, we might feature you on a future show. If you're not currently one of the poos, then you can join for only $3.99 a month by pressing the join button, which is down here somewhere, or by going to the relevant link in the video description. Alright, well, it is time for essential camera skills. This month, James thought he would try his hand at panning his camera to follow a moving subject. Thank you to Case Filters UK, who partnered with us to make this possible. As you'll see, filters are essential if you want to try this technique in bright sunny conditions, so check out casefilters.com to see their full range of Pro Spec filters. Alright, well, let's head over to the Caribbean.
When photographing a moving subject, we have the choice to freeze the movement by using a short exposure time, often referred to as a fast shutter speed, or blurring the movement by using a longer exposure time. However, there is a third option, when we use a longer exposure time and follow the subject by panning the camera during the exposure. It's not as easy as it sounds, but with a little practice, I'm told it shouldn't be too long before I'm taking some arty shots which portray movement.
So, to give this a go, I've come here to Havana in Cuba and to the world famous Malecon, where I'm going to find a couple of the principal ingredients you need for panning, something of interest and something that's moving. From where I'm located here, the sun is directly behind the camera on the other side of the road, which will actually work in my favour today. So, you know, front lit subject, sun coming over my shoulder, not a real problem. And the other advantage when I do cross the road in a second is I'm going to get this fantastic backdrop, this linear line that will run hopefully straight through the frame. And if I get the shutter speeds and I get the effect I'm really looking for, it's going to make the perfect backdrop to these beautiful classic cars you find here in Cuba. from this vantage point, I've got plenty of space here, and there's 3 lanes, as you saw when I was nimbly crossing there. So I've gone for a 35mm to start with. And it's a bit of a, I don't know, there's a bit of guesswork, to be honest, to do with the shutter speed, the focal length, distance from subject to camera, and then subject to background. So I'm giving it a go from here to start with, and then I'm going to work through the shutter speeds to see where I get. And it also slightly depends on the angle as well, so I've got a good view, but there's not much panning in that direction, obviously. But the more you swing round, the more you begin to pan, and that's where the variance of shutter speed will really start to show.
There is no golden number, no best exposure time, as the results will vary depending upon a number of factors such as focal length, your distance to subject, and not least the speed at which your subject is moving across the frame. An exposure time which is too short won't display enough movement, whereas an exposure time which is too long will make it impossible to keep your moving subject sharp. Trial and error is the way to go here, and ultimately you should find the sweet spot to give you the desired results.
God, blimey, I tell you, the one thing that this requires is a bit of patience. It's a beautiful day, but as you can see from the clouds, the sun's in and out. You know, there's not a lot to complain about. It's very warm, and I'm not leaving till next Thursday, which is about a week from today, so I've got plenty of time. Just not overly sure that the knees will stand up to this up and down business. Now, you might wonder why I'm getting down low when I lose a bit of the sea. Well, it's very simple, really. I just want to eliminate as much tarmac as I can, really. It's really about car, hint of sea, and then the beautiful sky. So as you probably noticed, there's been a filter on the front of this. Now, it's got a polarizer on it, and the reason for that is predominantly to knock a little bit of light down, but mainly to bring out the clouds and the sea that's been in the background. But as I'm panning around backwards and forwards anyway, you know, sometimes it'll have a greater effect than others because of the nature of the angle that I am to the sun. But overall, I'm not really reducing the shutter speed enough. I can get it down to maybe a 60th of a second at f16. So I think it's time to put a neutral density on, get that shutter speed even slower, and get my panning skills even higher.
Technique is everything when it comes to panning. You want to decide what part of your subject needs to be the sharpest and where you want this to be within your frame. Once you've decided these two crucial factors, move the camera in a smooth and steady fashion to keep the chosen part of your subject in the chosen position within your frame. This is where practice comes in, and it certainly took me a while before I was getting pleasing results.
Right, so I think I've kind of got what I was looking for here with the background, the cars, the kind of shutter speed, the movements, the panning. It's all kind of coming together pretty well. But it is, even though the sun's in at this particular moment, it is a baking hot day. So I'm going to go off and try and put one of the cars using these techniques, but in a sort of more metropolitan environment. You know, get some old tan Havana in the background as opposed to just this linear line. However beautiful this is, let's get one of these cars into its natural habitat.
One thing you don't want to do when panning is to get the expectation that your subject will all be pin sharp. It won't. Also, if like in my situation, the subject is reasonably close, then the perspective of it will change as it passes, so it's impossible to keep everything sharp. Just aim for one element and let the rest do what it does naturally. Here I chose the windscreen as my point to follow. Here it was the badge on the bonnet. And here, it was the driver.
First and foremost, I've learned a hell of a lot about panning, actually. I've learned that my initial instincts were probably correct to use a nice clean background because as I said earlier, I did spend the day wandering the streets of central Havana. I might have had the odd beer or two, but that didn't affect the panning, I can promise you that. But what did affect it was the speed of the vehicles. They were too slow. And what that means is that it made it incredibly difficult to get a good smooth motion with the camera itself. And the backgrounds, they were confusing, and it was quite bright, lots of contrast. It muddled everything up. But there are some nice shots in there nonetheless. But my initial instincts about wanting to let the cars tell the stories, the colour, the fins on the back, the grills on the front, the characters that drive them. Setting those cars on a really simple background, square on or at 45 degrees, and just letting them do the talking, just keeping everything simple, practicing your panning techniques, using a single spot, to lock on, not necessarily to focus. Clearly the car needs to be in focus, but choosing a spot to pan and track against. So whether it be the wing mirror, the front grille, the driver, whatever it is, find a spot matching the pace of the car. That's what it was all about. And I've learnt the distance using a 35mm lens from me to the vehicle to the background, all sorts of things. And there's some great shots. Now the other thing that I really surprises me is that I have a thing about sharpness, and actually it really doesn't matter in this instance. It's just about the beauty of the cars. The bar is definitely calling. I think it's time for a 2, 3, 4 cervezas.
Thank you to Case Filters UK for partnering with us on that feature. The entire team here at Photography Online all use Case Filters ourselves because we consider them to be the best on the market. On our most recent live show, we gave away a great filter kit from Case to one lucky viewer. See, this is the stuff that you're missing out on if you're not one of our poos. Talking of prizes, I think it is time that we found a couple of proud owners for those 2 flagship watches from our friends at Accurist. Last month, we asked you a simple question. Which range of Accurist watches are these part of? Odyssey, Origin, Olympic or Oceanic? The correct answer was Origin. Congratulations to everybody who got that correct, but there can only be 2 winners this time around. The 2 winners which were randomly chosen are on the screen now, so well done if you see your name appearing. You are now both proud new owners of these classy watches. If you'd like one of your own, or if you need to buy a special gift for someone, then head on over to the Accurist website to see their full range of men's and ladies' watches. And if you want another chance to win one of these, then simply join us for our next live show when we will be spinning the Photography Online Wheel of Fortune. Always an event worth witnessing, even if you don't win. Alright, well, in last month's show, Marcus flew to the US to photograph a total solar eclipse. While he was there, he was keen to show a few of our customers a place which he thinks could be the ultimate landscape location, period.
Monument Valley borders the state line between Utah and Arizona. It is, without doubt, one of the most iconic landscapes on the planet, largely thanks to its inclusion in countless movies. This is the classic road view as you enter from the north. You can then drive the 17-mile scenic loop, which gives you the classic views from the valley floor. For 99.9% of people, this is understandably enough. But if you want to raise the bar even further, then you need to reach for the top draw and head to the very best Monument Valley has to offer, a place known as Hunt's Mesa. We visit here every year for an overnight wild camp as part of our annual American Southwest photo tour. Providing the weather doesn't have other ideas, this is always the highlight of the trip. So I thought I'd invite you along on my most recent visit here.
So we are just leaving the town of Kayenta, and how long actually, before I answer that question, I can answer a long-lived debate. Elvis is not dead. He's here. There he is. There's Elvis. Say hello, Elvis. Elvis is our Navajo guide, and where we're going up to Hunt's Mesa you can't go there without a Navajo guide. So Elvis is looking after us. We've got a convoy of 3 vehicles. We've got Adam in the back, who's a 5th timer to Hunts Mesa, and we've got Simon, who's a 1st timer. Yep. You can tell he's looking a little bit nervous. This has been my 4th time, I believe. How long does it take to get up there, Elvis?
About an hour and a half.
Hour and a half. But at the moment we're on the highway, and that's going to stop fairly soon, and then the journey begins. So join us as we go up to Hunts Mesa, which is one of the most picturesque places on the planet.
Right off the bat, the scenery is breathtaking, and if it wasn't for the epicness of the location we were heading to, we'd be stopping every 100 metres to take another photograph. This is a very remote place, which only a few get to witness. In fact, I'm told we're the first to visit this year, as winter conditions make it inaccessible for several months.
So we've just left the easy part of the road, and we're now on to the start of the slower part. One thing I haven't explained to you, Simon, is that when we get stuck in the sand, the people in the back have to get out and push.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I sat in the front.
Right.
A large part of the experience of Hunts Mesa is the adventure of getting there. It's a journey which isn't for the faint-hearted, for reasons you're about to see, but it certainly adds to the adventure of getting to what could be the world's best view. It's not long before things start to get a little rough, as we traverse wind-blown sand which has to be taken at speed to avoid getting bogged down.
Nobody hasn't changed their mind.
No. Do you know any good chiropractors, Elvis?
Once that section has been negotiated, we head through the desert, gently climbing at first, but it's not long before the track disappears and things start getting more interesting as we hit the slick rock, some of it quite steep. From here, it's simply a case of gently picking our way up the side of the huge sandstone mesa. The views never desert you and only get better as you slowly gain altitude and get access to more elevated vistas.
Elvis, I'm all shook up. Hey. That joke was credited to Adam. Thank you very much. He's here all week.
As we neared the top of the mesa, progress became slower, sometimes being reduced to little more than walking speed. But no one was in a hurry, as the views weren't going anywhere, and on this occasion, the light was only ever going to get better. So as we continued upwards, we started counting downwards to the big reveal.
So we're almost at the top. Are we all still alive?
Just.
After 90 minutes of feeling like we've been trapped in a tumble dryer, we sense the summit is close, and there's huge anticipation and expectation for the view which we've come so far to see. When it eventually appears, it never disappoints, stretching for 30 miles or so over the entirety of Monument Valley. And despite the phrase being drastically overused, this is surely the one time when you can honestly say it doesn't get better than this. Finally, we arrive at our campsite for the night. How was that, Mr. Thompson?
Well, it was worth it in the end, wasn't it, Marcus, eh? Both ends.
It's always the phones that come out first, as people get their initial grab shots. Then, it's the cameras, handheld to begin with, before the tripods come out and things start to get serious. Some just choose to pace themselves and begin by drinking in the view with the eyes. And who can blame them? While the Navajo guides set up camp and get dinner on the go, we get the last couple of hours of daylight to have fun in this amazing scenery before us. And this is what we've come to see. Look at that, it's surely one of the best views in the world. And we're lucky today because we've been here several times and this is the best light we've ever seen. So we've got the sun setting over, funnily enough, to the west, and there's lots of kind of mid-level clouds around. What they're doing is they're causing the sunlight to be dappled on the scene. And there's a reasonable amount of wind, so the clouds are just moving across, and so I've just been standing here for the last half an hour just grabbing lots of shots just when there's different sections of the scene being highlighted. And I've taken colour positive, colour negative, black and white, infrared. Been pretty busy. I timed this shot just as the foreground was in half light to avoid it being too dominant against the background, which is clearly the main subject here. In this video, shot at exactly the same time, there's a cloud casting a shadow on the foreground rock, which would have made it too dark, but I didn't want it in full light, competing with the background. So I waited until this moment here, when the log is in half light, to take the shot. This is what photography is all about. It's not about megapixels, frames per second, or AI. It's simply about light.
This must be the most amazing sight I've ever seen in my entire life. I did have to sit down for 15 minutes and just look at it, and might sound a bit sappy, but there was a tear in my eye. It's a very, very spiritual place. And having run around for an hour taking photographs, I've had to sit down again because I think I'm a bit punch drunk. Beyond my expectation, way beyond.
So one of the real beauties of coming here is that we have the place to ourselves. So we're a team of 10 and there's no one else around, no one to get in the way, no one to wait for them to get out of your shots, no one flying drones. So apart from the wind, which gusts every now and again, it's really peaceful and tranquil.
The last direct light of the day was to die for, with warm golden light raking across the landscape. The sunset glow wasn't too shabby either, painting some beautiful tones on the clouds and the monuments below. In fact, we shot well into the blue hour, with the atmosphere changing every couple of minutes as the warm light slowly gave way to cooler twilight tones. Eventually, you have to admit that the best shots are already the ones captured. So it's time to put the cameras away, sample some proper bush food, and reflect on the amazing day we had all witnessed. However, our hunt's Mesa experience was far from over. In fact, this was only the halfway point.
After a surprisingly good few hours sleep, it was time to head to our sunrise location, which is different to the one we had shot at sunset, as we need to go around to the northeastern side of the Mesa to get the best morning light. The only way the drive could be more perilous than yesterday's was if it was in the dark. Oh well. We now have everything in the reverse order than what we had witnessed last night, starting with the gentle cool tones of blue hour. With clear skies to the east, we knew that more epic light was on its way. It's coming. It's simply a matter of time.
So after the perfect morning's photography, the sun's now come up. You can see the skies are pretty blue, so the light's just deteriorating. So it's breakfast time, but what better view to enjoy breakfast to, eh?
With memory cards and bellies full of good stuff, as well as the odd roll of film exposed, of course, it was time to say goodbye to Hunt's Mesa, at least for another year. We know it will always be here for us, but it's always a little tough to say goodbye, as you know there is more potential in the place than can ever be captured in just the few hours we had spent here. We still had the journey back to contend with, but this isn't simply a case of backtracking the route we did on the way in. You see, there's a more direct option, which is too steep to get up, but with the help of something called gravity, it's easy to get down. The route back also takes us past one of the area's most impressive but least visited arches. So it would be rude not to stop for a last photo opportunity and the chance to explore somewhere where you know very few people get to visit. All that's left to do now is to let gravity do the work.
It's amazing to think that the solar eclipse feature, which so many of you really enjoyed from last month's show, was actually part of the same trip as that Hunt's Mesa adventure. That feature was sponsored by Photography Online Adventures, which is a new brand that will be running all of our future trips under. Details of all of these are in this, which is our annual magazine. There are also photography related articles from the team and even a couple from our customers, so it is a great read. Plus, of course, there's lots of great photos to look at as well. We only charge what it costs us to print it, plus the cost of the postage, and there's a link if you'd like a copy in the usual place. All right, well, I'm about to head off to Spain for a couple of weeks to help host our annual photo trip there. Plus, we've got Shetland, the Dolomites, Venice and Namibia all coming up in the next few months. So if you fancy joining us, there are still a few places available on some of those trips. Just check out mc2photography.com for full details. All right, well, who's listened to the Photography Online podcast? What do you mean you don't know about it? It's our monthly radio show where we discuss all things photography. It is free to listen to and it makes a great companion when you're in the car, on a plane or cooking the dinner, although I would just recommend don't be holding any sharp knives when Marcus is speaking his mind. This month's episode has just gone live, so check that out when you've got the time. Among many other things, we ask why is photography so often expected for free? Plus we follow the case of the two people arrested for felling the UK's most photographed tree, and we discuss a few travel frustrations ahead of the summer holiday season. It's available from all the major podcast platforms, and we've included a link to it in the video description as well, but we also upload it here on our YouTube channel after a couple of weeks, so there's really no excuse to miss it. All right, well, regular viewers will know by now that we conclude every show with analogue affairs. However, there's lots of generic photography related information in these, so if you only shoot digital, don't switch off. Apart from everything else, you'll miss Marcus photographing a door.
Who doesn't like a nice derelict cottage to photograph? This one here is particularly good, and I saw this about 2 weeks ago, came to take some photos. But while the house is really good, and I was happy with those, had a little snoop around, and it's what's up here in the barn that I've come back to photograph today.
The first time I ventured into this barn, I didn't really know what to expect, but it certainly wasn't along the lines of what I found. It provided the perfect subject for a photo, so naturally I had to come back and do it justice.
So this door is obviously the attraction here, and I love the story that it's telling. This is just an old barn where it looks like people used to repair cars, and someone has obviously wanted a door for their barn, and so they've got one from either an old hotel or a manor house, because I can assure you there's no drawing room in this barn. So for me, it's the story that's the attractiveness here. But with the wood panelling and the door open like this, it's just crying out to be shot on film, I think. But when I found this the other day, the light was fairly similar to what it is here. And I just think that we need a glow from behind this door to really pick out the writing and almost seem like it's kind of inviting you in. So I've bought the 4x5 camera, which I think is the camera of choice for this, and we're going to wait for the ambient light to fall enough so that we can get some subtle light behind this, just make it look a little bit more enticing.
Once set up, I still had to wait a while for the ambient light levels to fall, so I decided to take a black and white shot of some bottles which were lined up on one of the sideboards. The light was falling perfectly on these bottles anyway, so it was one of those shots which was just there for the taking. All I had to do was bunch them up a bit to fit the 4x5 format. I used Kodak Tri-X, pushed one stop to ISO 640. The aperture was f11, which provided enough detail on the bottles, which were all at slightly different distances, but yet a shallow enough depth of field to render the rear wall clearly out of focus, therefore giving that three-dimensional feel.
So I'm all set up, 4x5 camera like I said, using a 150mm lens, which on this camera is a standard lens.
I've got these two LED light panels which I'm going to use to light the other side of the door. I haven't worked that bit out yet, but the good thing about these is that you can control them in two ways. Number one, you can control the brightness, so that will help obviously with the exposure and balancing the ambient light, but more importantly, you can control the colour balance. So we can set these to be really quite warm, which is what this shot's going to want. Obviously the warmness is only going to come across in colour film, so I'm going to shoot this on colour, but I'll also probably do a black and white version as well, just so that I've got both. That's the beauty with a 4x5 large format camera, is that you can shoot 2 or 3 different shots all on different films. So the light's falling. We've probably only got about 20 minutes before this will be ripe, and I'm all focused. I thought I was going to have to do some camera movements in order to keep everything looking good, but as it happens, I don't think they're necessary here. All my uprights look pretty good. The camera's dead level. I've got a little bit of lens fall on here just to get the bottom of the door in without having to point the camera downwards, because that would upset all my verticals obviously. I was thinking about putting a tiny little bit of swing on just to get the plane of focus running along the wall, but then it would be going against the door because the door's leaning inwards. So if I swing the lens to line up with the door, with the wall, I'm going to struggle with focus on the door. So I've just left it as it is because it's a happy medium between the plane of focus being on the door and on the wall. So nothing particularly technical going on here. Just got to wait for the light to fall, see how I can light this, and then we'll take a shot.
The lighting in this case was simple. One diffuse light shining directly on the back of the door, which looked like this, but the far wall is too dark, so a second diffuse light at lower power was used to illuminate this. Here's a before and after.
So there we go. It makes it look a little bit more inviting, and it picks out the writing on the door a little bit more. So the light balance isn't actually bad, so I probably need to get on with this. So let's get going. So all I need to do now is work out what my exposure is. I've got a spot meter here. So the first thing I need to do is identify the brightest part of the scene, which is almost certainly the light shining on the back of the glass door, and that is telling me it's EV6. The darkest point of this scene is the black of the door frame, and that is giving a reading of EV2. So I've only got a 4-stop difference between the darkest point and the brightest point. But I don't want the brightest point to be pure white, because that's going to take away all the atmosphere. This photo wants to be a low-key photo. So I think if I expose this at EV4.5, then that's going to ensure that my highlights, the brightest point, is going to be a little bit brighter than the mid-tone. But I'm still going to have enough exposure to record detail in those shadows there. So I'm going to start off by shooting this on colour transparency film, which has only got an exposure range of about 5 stops, but that's fine because I've only got 4 stops here to work with. Then as it gets darker, the contrast is going to widen obviously, because the artificial lights are going to stay the same ambience, but the ambient light is going to get darker. So everything that I haven't lit is going to get darker. Everything I have lit is going to stay the same. So the two are going to naturally drift apart. That's going to give me more dynamic range. So then I'm going to shoot the same shot again on colour negative film, which has got 7 or 8, even 9 stops. So we'll start with the colour positive and see how we get on.
Shot on Fuji Provia, this film perfectly suits the scene, providing increased contrast to that which naturally existed. The colours are truthful, but not too saturated. As you would expect, the detail is as good as it gets.
So that's my Provia done. So I'm going to do exactly the same shot now on colour negative film, and just wait for these ambient light levels to drop a little bit. So now we're on Portrait 160. Now when I did the previous shot, which was on Provia 100 colour transparency film, there was no reciprocity failure, so 25 seconds was 25 seconds. But now 25 seconds has become 1 minute and 9, because this film obviously suffers a lot more from reciprocity. So we're just having to give it a lot more exposure to get the same effect. But It really doesn't matter, we've got nothing moving here. There's no significant wind that's moving any doors or anything. The camera's obviously not moving, so the length of the exposure is pretty irrelevant really. So here we go for another one. This handy app is called Reciprocity Timer, and it works out the exposure compensation for all films and then gives you a stopwatch to time the exposure. So we've got 23 seconds left of this exposure. The only thing I haven't mentioned is the aperture. So I'm shooting this at f/22. The reason I'm shooting at f/22 is because on this lens, that's actually a middle aperture. This goes down to 64. So I want sufficient depth of field to get the entire door and the wall all sharp, but I just want the focus to fall off a little bit on the back wall when you look through the door, and I think f/22 will give me that result. So this is the shot I came to get. Once again, the detail is unparalleled and will easily surpass any digital camera, even the higher end medium format options. Here are the two side by side, just so you can see the difference between positive and negative film. The positive film shows more contrast due to its limited dynamic range, but the colours are richer too. By the time I'd taken the second shot on negative film, the ambient light levels had fallen and the dynamic range of the scene had exceeded that of positive film. Even so, the negative shows less contrast due to its increased latitude. This is why I find film photography so much more rewarding, because you have to match the scene to the film. I also took a black and white shot too, for no reason other than, well, why not?
Well, you can't say we haven't been diverse in our subjects this month. What other show gives you a windmill in Norfolk, a classic car in Cuba, an iconic landscape in the US, and an old door in Scotland? As we always say, this is the show for photographers. If you agree, help spread the word by telling your friends about us, because believe it or not, there are still a few photographers out there who don't know what they're missing. So help them out by pointing them in our direction. Next month, Harry takes me out to a remote part of the Isle of Skye to teach me the basics of wildlife photography. James is back in Cuba, this time photographing random strangers on the street and showing us how to approach people in a foreign land. We check in with the Photo Challenge team as they embark on their penultimate day of their National Park quest. Plus, if you've ever wanted a Hasselblad X-Pan camera but can't afford one, Marcus has some advice on how you can get the same results but at a fraction of the cost. Can't wait for that. Until then, take good care, but most of all, take good photos.